It's a no for me, dog. Sadly, that's about the extent of the feedback many of us have received or delivered in the ad industry. It's okay. Most humans suck at giving feedback. The good news, we can get better. And today's guest on the DesuckifyWork Podcast has some great ideas on how to do it. Cecilia Gorman is a coach and trainer who runs a manager boot camp that helps managers go from good to amazing. We talk about how to deliver challenging feedback directly and kindly, and how, if we can do just that one thing, the impact will be massive. We discuss how to receive tough feedback calmly and respectfully in a way that allows our perspective to be heard and valued. And we explore the value of being real and vulnerable as a manager. Don't listen to that pesky voice in your head. Vulnerability is a sign of strength, and it creates trust with your team. I trust that you'll get a ton of value out of this episode. Cecilia rocks, so let's roll. Okay, Cecilia Gorman, welcome to the DesuckifyWork Podcast.
TJ, so excited to be here. Thank you, my friend.
I am so excited to have you here. I think what you focus on in your work is very much needed right now. And I know what that is, but I'd love to give you a chance to tell the world what do you do for work? How'd you come to be doing it? And what's kind of your primary focus right now?
Yep. So my focus is on helping managers. And I feel like that was birthed out of just what I did over the course of my life and my whole career. So I was a kid who loved quotes, which sounds weird. But if you go back to like the 6th grade or 7th grade, Cecilia, my dad put up a piece of drywall on my wall. And I used it as like a thumbtack board, and I would cut quotes out of magazines. I don't even know where I got magazines from, but I would hang up things, and I would stare at these quotes and these pictures for hours. And there was always like something about leadership development, although I didn't have that phrase in my head at the time, really interested me. And so if you kind of move through maybe high school and college and just maybe the way my personality was, I was always kind of just driven to learn more about what leading meant. And so when I got into the industry that I was in, which is where you and I crossed paths, working in advertising, I was doing something totally different, but I found that I gravitated towards like hearing from people like, what do you want to do in this job? Or, oh, do you want that promotion? Or talking just about them and development equally intrigued me, because I think I was just always anchored in like, what does leadership mean in people's lives? So it's just always the person that people came and talked to. So it just seemed natural over the course of my career. I ended up getting certified as a speaker and a trainer. I ended up going to a lot of colleges talking about getting a career in advertising and what that meant to grow your career. So it just all kind of amalgamated into, I'm now a speaker, a trainer, and a coach. I help companies shore up the skills of their managers. So it's just, it kind of took a lifetime to get there, but I know that there were just seeds in our lives could be better, and we just have to focus on it and work on it. And now that just manifests itself through coaching other people, through doing leadership offsites, having online training sessions. And then I'm most proud of my work in my online course called Manager Bootcamp. So we put lots and lots of managers through that course, but just trying to get people to have that same spark about themselves and where their life and their career is going is probably like the end game for me.
I love that. I love the story about the 6th grade version of you. I'm sitting here thinking I had like Eddie Van Halen and other things like that on my wall. You were ahead of the game. It took me a while to catch on to some of what you're doing here, because I get it now.
Guess, like we didn't have phones. I guess we just, I don't know. I spent hours really just looking at pictures. I was always such a visual person, and so I just like to say it's kind of deep rooted in me, but helping managers is really like from the time that I spent managing people. But I feel like that's just such the difference maker in in a workplace, on a team, and then especially in our lives, I think we all probably have stories of managers who were awesome. And we so fondly remember them for certain reasons. And then we also have stories of managers who sucked and just stories about like the things that they did, you know? So I always tell people, you know, you just want to be the one that people are thinking fondly of. Like we just work on that part.
I love that. And I think we can dive into that because it's not as simple as it sounds, or it's not as easy as it sounds. It's probably really straightforward, but it's not easy. But before we go down that path, I love that you were talking about just sort of the importance of paying attention to your work and your career. And, you know, something I like to ask people is what role does work play in your life?
Gosh, I feel like so let me back up. When I left full-time work, it was in December of 2015. So like the first week of January of 2016, I'm this like new person. I don't have a job to go to. And that was like the biggest shock of my life. Like I didn't even know how to maneuver that landscape. And there was a lot of paranoia. There was a lot about like, I was just afraid, like, how am I making money? Who am I to not have a job? Like, how am I doing this? And all of that uncertainty stuck with me. I want to say it stuck with me for a good like 18 months. So, but what also came with that moment was the freedom of sitting in my own house and waking up to my own accord, interacting with my children in a way I had never interacted with them, right? Because I was a working mom. My kids went into daycare when they were like 10 weeks old.
Yep.
I describe it like I was at the land of Oz, and I looked behind the curtain and I was like, that's how life is supposed to feel. Like that's the role that work is supposed to play in your life. And I feel like it was this big secret that anyone who works full time never knows. They never even know there's a curtain there. But the second I got home, I was like, oh, I want to go for a walk at 10. I can go for a walk at 10.
Yeah.
You know, like I want to start dinner at 3:15. I can start dinner at 3:15. So everything in my life did this huge shift. So it's not that I was still working through how to be an entrepreneur and how to make money. And there was all of that fear that went along with that. But I felt like I got really settled in how work is supposed to feel. And then I just had the privilege and maybe the means to try out entrepreneurship and to give it a go and to see if that was going to work. So that was 8 years ago. So now I feel like I've got it down. My son and I were actually having a conversation at dinner last night. I was reading him something from a magazine that I was looking at. It was about like people and work, et cetera. And he said, oh, have you ever had a job where you had to work 60 hours a week or 80 hours a week? And I go, you know what, Grayson? I never have. I had to think back on every single job that I had and what it asked of me and my life. So I think that I already had work playing a certain role, but when you add being a mom and then ultimately being divorced on that, like everything was still pretty tough.
Yeah.
But it's not like I went from, oh my God, I work 80 hours a week, or I'm a lawyer, I'm like 100 hours a week and I never see my family. So work never played that extensive of a role in my life.
Yeah.
But now I'm at the other end and I'm like, oh, isn't this beautiful? Like this just feels like a better coat to put on to do this thing called life.
Yeah. It makes me think of the phrase that a lot of people use, which I like, is work-life integration. You know, a little more than balance. You talked about, you know, I can go for a walk at 10, I can put dinner on at 3:15. You know, I think when you do that right, it looks like what you talked about, like meaning there's not hard blocks between those two things, but you still are able to set the boundaries you need, because that's the risk, right? If some people, they go work at home and they're like, I'm never off, you know, this is not what I expected. So how, just to follow up on your situation, how do you keep the good parts, which is the ability to integrate your life and to sort of own your day, without allowing work to consume the day?
Yeah. Well, that took quite a few years, honestly. The one thing that made the biggest difference for me, and I feel like we all learned this most people learned this in 2020, was I had my laptop at my dining room table. So my condo's pretty small. I don't have like an extra office or an extra bedroom.
Yeah.
So the dining room table was my work table. And I did that for, 2016, 17, 18, 19, and 2020. And I couldn't turn it off. I sat down for dinner. My laptop was there. Correct. My laptop was there. My laptop was always there.
Yeah.
I ended up building a desk on a wall in my dining room. So like my dining room table is behind me. Now I'm facing a wall and there's a little desk here. The second my computer went on a desk and I have to sit down at a desk to start work, I got a better delineation. I got a better boundary. Because now I can eat dinner and I'm just eating dinner and I can walk through that. Like I'm not walking by the dining room table and my stuff is there. So that very tiny little physicality, that physical change helped me so much. There's, I think this came from the book Deep Work. There's a guy named Cal Newport. He wrote a book called Deep Work. And it's basically like, stay on track with one thing, stay focused, you'll do better work. And he basically said, attach an environment to a task. So for instance, your bed should not be the environment that's attached to the task of checking work email. Right? That can be when you get down to the dining room table or you get down to your desk or you whatever. But the better you can be about, this is the place I do this. This is where I write, or this is where I, reply to emails. And then that also means this is where I don't.
Yeah, I like that. And I think I probably have some room for improvement there, because I am guilty of the occasional wake up and check some work emails thing. But I do have my little office, which I do think helps. What I found actually is, for deeper work, it needs to be in my office. But sometimes if I'm doing sort of more administrative stuff, I'll go out on the couch with my laptop and I'll just do some work there, because it's kind of like mindless. Yeah. And it's more just
different
like
pull on your brain.
But if you need to get into like the actual deep work and the more creative and thinking work, having a space for it's great. And I love that there's just simple things we can do like that to sort of set the boundaries for ourselves and make it easy for us to resist our impulses, which is the flip the laptop open all the time.
Well, and the thing is we're just operating by default, because we're not really thinking that detailed about our day as it's going.
Yeah.
So if you take something like stopping for lunch, the simple thing of saying, like the place I don't eat lunch is standing at the kitchen counter. Because it's so easy for me to just make whatever I'm making, stand there and eat it, and then come back and sit down and do work. So I now say you can't eat standing at the counter. So it's a little bit of this is where I do this and this is where I don't do this. That helps me remember, like, I get to craft what this life looks like. And if I'm not taking 5 solid minutes to sit my butt at the dining room table or go sit on the patio to enjoy a meal, then what am I letting this life be? Because I'm not sure it's supposed to be that.
Yeah. I think, again, I think most of us are guilty of some of those things, but I like that there's it's a simple choice we can make, and we can set those boundaries, and I like the idea of sort of assigning places for things. The counter is not for eating, the counter is for prep. Eating is meant to be at a table outside, wherever you can enjoy that moment and be in that moment. I think that's the hardest thing for so many of us, is to be in the current moment instead of rushing to the next moment,
Right. And I just think there's this pressure to get back to the laptop, like something like something's happening that I'm not a part of. And I think that's maybe my entrepreneurial brain maturing. And maybe after I've been working from home like 12 years or 15 years, I will continue to learn more about myself and what works for me and what's draining me and what's not. I'm just at that life stage now where I'm getting better at saying no to things that don't make me feel enthusiastic and fulfilled. And I want more of that. I want decisions that help line that life up for me. So it's just, it takes a little it just takes maturity to be able to do that. Maybe some confidence.
Yeah, I can see that. A little trial and error, figuring out what works, and then starting to become more intentional with the choices we make. One thing, it wouldn't be the DesuckifyWork podcast if I didn't get into some sucky work stories. So do you have a personal suckiest work story? No, we can preserve the names of the guilty.
So many. I have so many, not only things that happen to me, but that happen to other people, since I coach managers. Sure. I am constantly just floored by what people tell me about what their manager does. Like if somebody really gets to me, I write a blog post about it, or I'll put it on LinkedIn. Sometimes I'm like, you will not believe what just happened, and I'll leave the names out. But for me personally, like the thing that stuck with me my whole life was I was in my second job. So I was probably 4 years out of college.
Okay.
And I was working at an ad agency, my first time working at an agency. And I was in print production. That's the industry that I started out in. And I had handled the printing of this particular catalog, and the print vendor made a mistake on it. And I didn't know they made a mistake, but my account person got sent a sample or something. And this gentleman, and mind you, I'm 20, I don't know how old you are then, 24, maybe 5?
Yeah.
This gentleman had to have been in his 40s. He just was a businessman. Comes up to me in the center of this place and starts flipping his lid over this mistake that was made on this catalog. Like yelling, like he had spittle coming out of his mouth. He was so mad. And I can remember thinking, my first thought was, are you allowed to yell at people at a work? Like, it was so new to me. Oh, is that allowed? Like, you can yell at someone at a workplace? Like, I was just so mystified by that, let alone what he was doing to me.
Sure.
And I was like floored, and I was on my way to go catch an airplane to go do a press check somewhere. So I went in my office, grabbed my stuff, went to Orange County Airport, got on the plane, and I bawled the whole entire way to wherever I was going. Wow. And that has stuck with me. Yeah. One, I don't remember the guy's last name, or I would totally cyber stalk him on LinkedIn. But I just remember being like, one, that should not be allowed. Two, did he have any remorse over that? Like, afterwards, was he like, oh shit, I went off on this young little girl, whatever. Like, I wonder what he was thinking. Or was that just another day at the office and you're allowed to treat people like that? And I think that's the kind of behavior that goes unchecked, that often goes unchecked. And then people learn that that's okay. Not only is that okay for someone to do it, but that's okay, and I have to take that. Versus like, hey, hang on. Like, I don't know what I would say now, but I would hopefully have other tools to not only interrupt that moment, or to circle back to that moment afterwards if I couldn't actually get my brain working when someone's coming at me hot like that.
Yeah, I mean, the presence of those behaviors in the absence of, and when this will start leading us towards some of the work you do, but in the absence of any real concrete training for managers and leaders, that becomes a model that somebody else follows, right? They go, I guess one way to get people to do what you want is to stand in the middle of the office and just berate the person with the least amount of power in the office, and they will then do whatever you want. And there's so many things wrong with that, but and I know you deal with that in a whole number of things that I want to get into. But I think piggybacking off of this, because I think the leadership and management challenges are really present right now. And it's not just people yelling, it's people not quite knowing how to navigate the world we're in. So I wonder what you think of sort of the current state of work right now. You know, if there was a suck meter from horribly sucky to wonderfully unsucky, where does it seem to fit there for you?
Here's what I tell managers. I don't think there's been a harder time to manage people than right now. Like, I think we underestimate how hard it is to represent a company, to keep work on track, to do whatever day job is my industry and my thing, to also manage the jobs and lives and hearts of other people, to also navigate remote work and disconnect, and not to mention the world divisiveness and drama, and then the openness to talk about mental health that's never been there, and maybe even just the sensitivity that we all have about it, and rightly so.
Yeah,
like you're tiptoeing and maneuvering through a landmine, and no wonder it's so hard to manage people. So what happens, I think, is if everything is really hard, I have to have hard conversations. That's a hard topic. That's a hard thing. And I don't like hard. I'm going to retreat from that and retract from that. So there's a lot of conversations that aren't being said. There's a lot of disconnect that it just is being left unbridged.
Yeah.
There's a lot of space and gap that's happening in the leadership like landscape, because the world is so tough and crazy. So it's birthed out of post-pandemic. It's just the state of the world.
Yeah.
And I think we underestimate how hard it is to manage. That said, I think that's why my heart and soul is so deep on Manager Bootcamp, which is then all the more reason why we should introduce managers to at least some fundamental, comprehensive ideas about how to manage people that will not only make them feel more confident and equipped, but also give them more tools to be able to then have impact on other people. Because managers are, their performance and their ability and their skills are contagious to the next person.
Yeah.
So if I can improve myself and I manage 3 people, well, look at that. I get 3 people that I could possibly impact and lift up their skills too. So it's always this water falling, like exponential effect. So for every dollar that you invest in training a manager, you're going to see a multiplier of returns.
Yeah.
So it sucks because it's really hard. It's just a hard world to navigate right now. It sucks because everybody's moving so fast. Everybody's so tight belt that taking time for training, having money for training, all of that seems like a luxury rather than a fundamental.
Yeah, which it's funny because maybe it's, being in a position where, now I am an entrepreneur now, and I'm doing this coaching thing, and I have some distance from it. It becomes so obvious that like, it's not a luxury. Like, I mean, and as you just said, like the impact is so great. It can be 1 to 3, 1 to 4, 1 to 7 with each manager. What do you find as you talk to executives and you're trying to help them consider putting some of their managers through your program? What allows them to sort of open their eyes and see the value?
Honestly, what opens their eyes is the symptoms, the problems that are rising up. Like I could tap dance all I want and look behind mirror number 3. Like I could show them all the pretty things, but until they're feeling the problem, or usually it's, the HR person, like way too many employee relations coming in, their office is a revolving door. People are leaving and saying and pointing at their manager on the way out. Like when the problems are just too much, then they're like, we've got to work to solve this. So typically when I'm talking to a prospect, I say, okay, are you talking to me because you're being proactive and you want to invest in your managers? Or are you talking to me because there's symptoms and there's problems that are surfacing because of your managers? And they'll go, both. They want to say number 1 just because it's the right thing to say, but usually it's number 2 that's making them say that this is the thing we've got to fix. Yeah. Because it's like I say, you can't build a mansion on mud. So if you have a company that you're trying to build and grow, a startup, or, we hired 50% more people this year, or anyone who's in sort of a growth mode, you have to have those solid bricks in place before you could do any more growth, because the foundation can't hold. And that foundation is the abilities of your managers. People who are being promoted super fast. Like, all these people were individual contributors. Now they're all managers. Like, there's this speed to business that's doing an injustice to people. Like, I know when you and I were coming up through the ranks, like, you were a copywriter for 5 or 6 years.
Oh, yeah.
7 years. And then you became a senior copywriter. Like, I see people, they're like AE, like assistant AE, senior AE account, like in 4 years. And I just think, I tell people, like, don't be so fast to get promoted. You've got to like grow in depth in the position that you're in. And I don't know if we're allowing that. The speed of business, I don't know if is allowing that as much as it just used to be the norm.
Yeah. How do you sort of counter that? I mean, one, can you counter that? Can you get companies to see that those rapid promotions are ultimately adding to the mud instead of building the bricks they need? And then if you can get them to see that, what can you do to help people sort of navigate a more, I'll say, sensible timeline of growth for people towards managers? Because the move from sort of doer to manager is really hard, and honestly, not for everybody. But if it is for somebody, are there sort of benchmarks that you help people understand? So it's like, okay, when somebody shows up this way, they may be ready for this kind of role. Do you get into that level of granularity with people?
I don't, only because I'm usually after the fact.
Yeah. Okay.
Like, they promoted them and then, we promoted people too soon. Yeah. Here's what I would say is, when we're talking about employee development, both the individual needs to be a little bit more savvy about what growth means for them. Because I know there was a time in my career where all I wanted was a title and money. Like that's the only thing I had on my radar. And I wish I would have had the wherewithal to say, how else can I grow? Can I take on this responsibility? Can I go to this conference? Can I be mentored by this person? Can I be trained in this skill set so that I get thicker before I get taller? So what's happening is everybody's getting taller. They're like a bean sprout, a really thin bean that's growing up versus time to get thick in space. Yeah. So the employee has to have some wherewithal around, what does development look like for me? As well as both the manager and the company have to understand what they can do to help somebody feel developed. Because a lot of promotions happen by threat.
Yeah.
We're going to lose this person. Yeah. They're going to quit. Or they gave their notice. We can't lose them. They're already asking for a raise. I'm sorry, they're asking for a raise. They've been here 6 months. Like, so they feel like there's these threats coming at them. So they react with a promotion. Sure. Because that's the calming answer, but I don't know if it's the right answer. So it's a little bit of work on both sides. And I know I've been victim to that. We're going to lose so-and-so. They've only been here 5 months. We're giving them what they need because we gotta plug that hole. Yeah. I've been on both sides of that. But I think if employees can understand and start thinking through, out of this job, what do I want out of it? I've told people, like, okay, no more promotions for you for a little bit. Okay. Like, just sit where you're at. Here's the things you need to grow, because you just look at their track record. You're like, oh my gosh, you're an account director. There's no way in 3 years you could have been in enough client situations to be professionally mature enough to have that title. Right. Yeah. So there's professional maturity. We all get that at different timelines. It doesn't mean you could get it in 2 years, I suppose. But some people take 20 years.
Well, it's as you say all this, I think about sort of the journey in the creative department in advertising, which is kind of its own unique beast. But I think advertising in general doesn't do a great job of even really explaining what growth looks like, other than the markers of senior this, associate director this, whatever. But there's no real like definition around that. And there's certainly not much in the way of, here's how you can grow outside of getting promoted to senior copywriter, ACD. Here's what that looks like. And in the creative space, so much is put on the sort of portfolio and what kind of work you did. And understandably so, that's your product. But if you're ultimately on a leadership path, to simply have a great portfolio does not in any way make you potentially a great leader. And there's this vacuum of what are the skills I need to have when I show up as a senior copywriter? Because I'm already starting to lead maybe some projects now, and I'm starting to do that. I don't know how to do that. I'm just being told I do it now. And then ACD, and now you're maybe even like managing a couple juniors at times. And then you suddenly show up at CD and it's like, well, I produce some great work, but I have none of those leadership managerial skills. I have no idea of how to show up. I have no idea about presence as a leader. Are you finding folks in the advertising world paying attention at all to that, particularly on the creative side, but I guess anywhere?
So when I was in it, when I was working in creative management, that was the thing, man. I mean, I guess if I could have stopped and been a coach and a trainer right then, I think we do a disservice to people in the creative department because of that. You're so good at what you do. And then next thing you know, you're promoted. And it's like, my thing is I want companies and maybe ECDs to do a better job of Friday, you were a senior copywriter. Monday, you're an ACD. Monday, have I told you this is what looks different for you now that you're an ACD? Here's the expectation we have of you now that you're an ACD. Like, do we delineate and verbalize what the difference is in expectation that we have of you? We should be doing that before they're promoted. Oh, by the way, timesheets, you're now the timesheet cop. Oh, performance reviews. Yeah, you're the one writing them now. Oh, yeah, and you're giving them. Oh, yeah. Like, kind of warning people of what's to come. I still think people would say yes, because it's always going to come with more, typically going to come with more money. So we're like, I'll do that type sheet. I love wrangling people.
How hard could it be? Yeah.
Right. But I don't think we do a good job. And especially as you get into director and VP and SVP, I'm in shock at how we let people take on those big titles, but we never say, hey, as a VP, here's the difference that we expect from you. You're now a role model and a spokesperson for the company. You have more eyes on you. Here's what we expect in terms of the way you communicate with other people. Here's what we expect in the way that you carry yourself in meetings. Like, I'm going to outline for you what that next level looks and sounds like and how it behaves. You can take care of your day job and doing the thing that you're doing, but I'm going to say now that you're at this level, this is what this looks like. I would be floored if any company did that.
I've never experienced it.
No,
never.
The only time I saw something that was quite eye-opening, and the first time I saw it, I think it had space to be better, was when I went to Oakley. So when I moved from advertising to Oakley, I was still doing the same job. So it was still creative management, still helping run the logistics of the creative ops team. But they actually, and I wanted to be maybe I was a director and I wanted to be a VP. I think that's what it was. And you could be an SVP. They actually had a chart where they said director, VP, SVP, and they outlined like global acumen, financial skills. Like they went like skill by skill by skill, and they outlined what you needed to have in each of those areas for each of the levels. It didn't tell you how you got it.
Right.
But I was like, okay, that's somebody outlined all of this. So I would go like director. Okay, I should be having this, should do this. Okay, I want to be VP. I got to have this. Like, it was the first time I was like, oh, there is a difference between these positions versus typically with you're just kind of doing the same job you were doing before.
You're just getting more money and you have a handful more people maybe underneath you, which is sort of the worst of it, right? Because okay, we're paying you more money. You're now a GCD or an ECD, and you're responsible for 50 people instead of 10. Oh, by the way, you still don't know how to manage people. Yeah. And now your impact is 1 to 50. Feedback. That's a great point. I know that's a big thing, because I want to actually dive into that, because you talked about people are showing up and complaining about people. And I imagine some of it might be feedback related. I'm sure there's some others. So I'd love to start with feedback as one of the big challenges for managers. And then maybe we can go into a few of the other areas where the struggle, that pressure point that you keep finding, people say, this manager sucks because of this reason. Yeah. Maybe we can go through a few of those, but let's start with feedback, because feedback's really hard. And it's another thing. I think we kind of tend to do it sort of the way we think we want it. And I also think we tend to overcorrect, like, meaning for me, I don't respond well to negative feedback. Some people are actually boosted by that. And I think when I'm at my worst giving feedback, I shine it up too much.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
What do you see as some of the biggest challenges with feedback, and how can people actually get better so that they are having the impact they need to have?
Yeah. Well, that's like, for me, that's the biggest nut to crack.
Mm-hmm.
I think of feedback like a hot potato. I'm holding this hot potato and I need to give it to you. And if I'm uncomfortable with what the topic is, or it feels like you might take this the wrong way, like I'm trying to get out of that discomfort as fast as possible.
Mm-hmm.
As well, like you said, when I hear things, your brain is constantly judging the quality and the impact of those sentences. So you're like, oh, do I believe that? Do I not believe that? Does that sound true? Does that not sound true? And the second something hits a nerve, your physiology now is dealing with that. So you've been triggered by some kind. So I had a manager say to me in a performance review, first sentence out of their mouth, Cecilia, your team is good, not great. And I went, well, that's not true. And my brain latched onto that sentence. I was so pissed. I didn't listen to anything else the guy had to say. I couldn't tell you to this day. I'm still pissed about it. I still don't believe it was true. And I wasn't equipped enough to say, hang on. I actually believe 180 degrees different than you. Tell me what you're seeing that I'm not seeing. So it's a matter of being armed with, like, how can you do something with that moment that feels productive? Because ruminating, feeling triggered, what does he think? Telling the story how, like, none of that's productive. So we're trying to switch from an unproductive moment to a productive moment. So there's lots of advice you can give givers of feedback and receivers of feedback. But the first thing we have to understand is that the physiology that comes along with, I'm uncomfortable. And so here's what my tendency is going to be. I'm going to say this softer than I need to, and hope that you get the gist of it. I'm going to say it fast. So we're doing all sorts of things to make that moment less uncomfortable versus being armed with, hey, TJ, you and I have to talk about something. Honestly, I feel a little bit uncomfortable. So if I'm like talking fast or misstepping, it's just because I care so much about you and this getting resolved that I don't know how to broach this. So let me just take a breath and get started. Like I could just be a human and admit to you, this is going to be weird. We have to talk about you're not wearing deodorant at work anymore. And everybody's thinking like the conversation that you absolutely think is the worst thing you would have to say to somebody. It's okay to say, this is, I'm finding it awkward to get this out of my mouth. If you'd be patient with me. And then the next tendency is to make it less what we think is painful. So we're trying to say something nice. Then we tell you the bad thing, and then we're like, oh, well, it's not that bad. You'll be fine. You can fix this. Then we'll like try to make it lighthearted. So we give the like compliment sandwich to somebody, which is also a difficult thing because I'm going to bring you up and tell you something good. Then I'm going to bring you down. Now, and I have to tap dance and try to bring you back up again when you're still stewing about, my team is good, not great.
Right.
So the thing that I try to help managers do is you build somebody up and you never let them down. You just build them up and you give them an and. So you say, TJ, I don't know if I tell you enough just how much your personality adds to the dynamic of our creative team. Like you're just, you're always positive. You're such a smiler. And I love that about you. And frankly, I don't tell you enough. And there are a few things that you've been doing with our clients in meetings that are kind of detracting from that reputation of being a really sunny person. You've been walking in with a scowl on your face. You've been real direct and sour with them. And I'm just curious, like, where is that coming from? Because I would just love to give you some like ability to just turn that around and make that work for you.
Yeah, I think when it comes to giving feedback, the tendency to want to soften it is natural. Right? How can you be both direct and kind in giving feedback?
What I think it starts with is just being yourself. Because I think, at least for me, a lot of managing was posturing, like must act like manager, must say what manager says. I think, honestly, it wasn't until I got to Oakley, which was quite some time deep in my career, that I finally just took a breath and showed up and spoke and acted like myself I was able to be direct, to say, hey, I'm really surprised we're talking about this. Hey, you know what? This is the last time you and I are going to talk about X. And to just very genuinely say, this behavior is not going to continue. And if you can find a way to just be yourself, and even if that includes the sound bites like, hey, TJ, this is uncomfortable for me to say this, or I've never had to talk to somebody about this before, so I'm feeling nervous. Like, even if I have to admit that this is going to be a weird conversation for me, and I'm just trying to get it out right, that I can say that with genuineness, and the person receiving it now goes, oh, okay. Like they're trying their best, and they hear it differently.
Yeah. I mean, there's something disarming about coming in with, I'm a little uncomfortable saying this. So you sort of, you humanize yourself, right? If you're the manager or the leader or whatever, and there is a power differential between you, you immediately kind of bring yourself to okay, now we're having a conversation, but then your words can still be very direct. Like, we're not going to have this conversation again. This is the last time. But how different that is versus, we're not going to have this conversation again. This is the last time. How dare you? It can be almost the same words.
Yeah.
But it's about tone and body language and inviting them into the conversation rather than making it this kind of like, I'm standing over you and I'm lecturing you. There's such a distinction there. Yeah.
Because the physiology of the second I feel attacked or I'm caught off guard, my brain is now doing something totally outside the conversation at hand. So what I tell managers is, you got to be in the conversation with your words, but you got to be like a drone over the conversation, just double checking. Did I lose TJ? Is he pissed at me? Is he rolling his eyes? Did he cross his arms? Did he stop talking? Like, you have to be taking in, are they even hearing you? Because if they're not, and there's a good chance that they might not be, you're going to have that conversation again.
Yeah. And that's even worse. If you were afraid of having that conversation in the first place, having it twice really sucks.
It just is the gift that keeps on giving. They say that you save 8 hours for every performance conversation that you address. And it makes sense, because if you don't, or you soft pedal it, or you're like, oh, it's just something little, they might not do it again. You ignore it, whatever. You're still going to be sucked up in all that follow-up that comes from not solving the problem.
How do you so we're kind of focusing on the deliverer, and I know you talked about the receiver, and that's a trickier thing in some ways, because the power dynamic is now shifted. Yeah. And I can even think of examples where I've had bosses, like, if I look back, I go, oh yeah, they were trying to tell me something there, but I maybe didn't fully hear it because they either soft pedaled it or talked fast. Didn't want to hear it. So because it wasn't given to me fully directly, I allowed myself the interpretation that allowed me to not feel like I was attacked. Yeah. So if you're in that situation as a receiver of feedback, and you know there's something coming, but you also know that you're not being given it as directly and cleanly as you could be, what can you do? What's sort of a safe way of approaching that?
So we teach a framework as both a giver and a receiver. So for a receiver, it helps. We have before, during, and after. And basically that means you have 3 buckets that have tools in them. Things you can do before you give or receive feedback, things during, or actually, and things you can do after. Yeah. So before, if I'm going in my performance review, I could just think as a receiver, like, what's my boss likely to be bring up? What are areas that I actually need to work on? Where's the space that I have to grow? So I can anticipate where my boss might say. Yeah. So that a comment like, your team is good, not great, I might be better prepared for, because I've already thought through where my team is not great and where they should improve. Okay. So I can be mentally a little bit primed for what I'm about to hear. Like, I can be curious about my own growth. Like, all right, what's my boss going to tell me? Where can I grow? Like, I can get excited about my growth and development. Despite how equipped a manager is as giving it to me, because most managers suck. So you got to distill how they give it to what they give. And then when I'm in the moment, practicing having tools that allow me to say, hang on, I'm actually feeling a bit triggered by what you said about my team. Do you mind? I'm going to go get a drink of water. I want to think that through, and then I'm going to come back. So I can time it out. I can ask for a moment. I can say. That's a tough thing to do in a power dynamic.
Yeah.
So we also teach givers. You got to give them a moment. I know this is a lot. Do you need a moment? Right. So we're trying to teach both ways. You have every right to say, I think differently. I disagree, but you need to say it respectfully. Tell me more about what you're seeing that I'm not seeing. So being able to take a time out to ask a question. Hey, I'm not sure I agree. Will you tell me more about that? Can I have a day to think about what you said? Yeah. I'm feeling like my heart is beating really fast by what you said. So something in me triggered. I want to sort out what that is.
Yeah.
Being able to use your big kid words. It sounds easy. It's hard to do. But just knowing what is possible for you to say, like, I didn't know when I was 20 that I could tell my boss, hang on.
Right.
Right?
No.
Probably the dynamics are different now. And then, so that's during. And then after, we always want to get in the habit of thinking about what was just said to me. How am I feeling about what was just said to me? If I separate the messenger from the message, what is something I can do differently because this was told to me?
Yeah.
So it's ultimately my responsibility. You can tell me that, I suck at presentations. That's my choice. I either can decide to work on it, or I can decide that feedback isn't meaningful and do nothing about it. I still have a choice, but part of it is me thinking about what you said. And then what am I going to do differently because you told me my presentations aren't good? Okay. Then I always encourage people after to go back to their manager and say, based on what you told me, here's what I'm going to do. So you actually get credit, 1, for being a good listener, 2, being a good digester and hearer, and 3, being a good follow-upper and saying, TJ, you told me that about presentations. Here's what I'm going to do. I signed up for this class on LinkedIn Learning. I'm going to do a dry run of my presentations with Joe next time I have to do one. And so I'm going to tell you, here's what I'm shifting because you gave that feedback to me.
I like that. And there's a few things in what you just said that I like. I love the way you broke it down to like how I listen, how I think about it, then how I follow up about it, like getting stronger at each of those. Listen better, think and ponder about what you heard better, and then come back with an approach and a follow-up that may not be exactly what your boss is expecting or wanting to hear, but at least you've come back and go, here's what I heard, here's what makes sense to me, here's the way I think I can deal with it. There's so much power in that. The other thing you said that I like is like getting curious and getting like interested in how feedback can ultimately help you grow. And I think there's actually something empowering about if you lean into the idea of wanting to hear how you're doing, you hear it differently.
Yeah.
It's now like fuel as opposed to sort of these barbs, and your physiology will change. I almost feel like I was reliving my physiology as you talked about some of these things. Like when somebody like comes at you and you're just like, you immediately go into that, like, I know I'm not, or that's not true, or you're just coming from this place.
That's what defensiveness is. Defensiveness is I don't want to take what you're serving up to me, so I'm going to push it away. It's like you're trying to give me a plate of spinach. I'm like, no, thank you. So it's very natural for us to be defensive. It's a protection mechanism. So this call for curiosity is really like, and the idea that being curious about feedback is kind of a no-brainer. That's the thing I think companies are missing, which is if we want to make work suck less, then day one, you get hired, we say, hey, TJ, welcome to our company. Hey, by the way, feedback is a huge component of our culture. So you can expect that me as your manager, we're going to be regularly exchanging feedback. You have me, me of you. We do that in our one-on-ones typically. But if I see something that has happened that might impact your performance, are you cool if I share it with you? So I'm going to tell you it's part of our team. I'm going to pre-permission it. So you're going to say, well, yeah, if you see something, tell me. So now you've given me permission to do that. So if I ever have to bring something up that's awkward, I go, hey, TJ, remember when you were first hired and we talked about feedback and you said you were cool if I saw something? Hey, listen, in yesterday's meeting, there's one thing that I've seen occurring, and yesterday just kind of cemented it. Can we talk about X? Of course, because you already told me I could.
Yeah. you've paved the way for it. And yeah, I hear it differently. I think all of that, like you do the prep work.
You said yes to it. And I think that, like, if we're going to fix one thing on the quest to make work like suck less is, can we just talk about feedback before we have to give feedback?
Yeah. And that comes back to that, like, simple, but maybe not easy, because you got to get used to having those conversations, and you got to build it into your culture, and you got to sort of train people on that. We need you to have these conversations. We need you to have them in a certain way, so that it's not like held as a threat. I'm going to tell you when you screw up. It's more like, no, we learn by giving feedback. That's just the only way we're going to learn and grow. And you're a part of that. I'm a part of that. And this is how that's going to look. I love that. God, it's so funny as you describe all this. I'm now like reliving my whole career, both as a giver and receiver of feedback, right? And just like, oh man, there's so many opportunities I could have done better on both of those ends. But I think that's wonderful.
It's a practice, though. That's why it's a practice. That's tell managers, like, life is just a practice. Like, we tried something yesterday and it felt clunky. I can think about it. I can go, okay, well, next time. And then I get to practice it again. Yeah. And that's what I think all of managing is. And what's so beautiful about it is, like, we're just on this never ending quest to be a better version of ourselves as a manager. So if you're like, oh my God, I never give feedback that way. Well, it's okay. No worries.
You will. You can tomorrow.
Now you can think about it. You can think about your buckets. And I tell people, even if you forget the before bucket, you forget the during bucket because you're too nervous, you always have the after bucket.
After. Yeah.
That's the comforting right there. You can say, you know what, TJ, yesterday I gave you some feedback and I will not be nominated for Manager of the Year. I don't know. That came out of my mouth in such a clunky way, and I'm just going to apologize. But I'd love to just make sure that we cover the most important things that you should take away from that conversation. Like, I can circle back. There are so many things we can do after. That's comforting.
Yeah. There's I think maybe this is partially the pace that we talked about earlier, but there's almost this feeling that every moment, particularly like the big moments, it's a presentation, I'm sharing work, it's a one-on-one, whatever, that there's a finality to it. Like, it feels like this is the thing that decides all the things. And so we put so much weight on it. And if you can recognize, like, the ability to break it down into those parts, and especially knowing what you just said, there's always after. Life is a practice. We can always get better. Life is not like these moments where we are tested and determined to have failed or succeeded. It's a series of these little more bite-sized experiences that are never perfect, but maybe we can make them slightly more perfect and slightly closer to that better version of ourselves. I think the way you outline these approaches is so easy to get, which is what I love. It's like, it's very crisp. And then it's just about doing them and doing the repetitions. One of the things you mentioned earlier that I want to just touch on as we start to get closer to wrapping up here is it's sort of the idea of self-awareness as a leader. It is a hard thing to do because your feedback loops completely change. You've now got people whose instinct is to say things that please you around you. Maybe your boss doesn't even get to see how you're managing all that much. They only see whatever comes around you. What are one or two things that we can do as leaders to simply become better at being self-aware?
Well, self-awareness is the lesson 2 in module 1 of bootcamp.
Nice.
And the reason why it is because I say, like, it's such an important thing for leaders, and yet I never heard the term self-awareness in any time in my whole career. Like, we never talked about it. So here's how somebody can get better at self-awareness is, first of all, know what you want to be more aware about. So we do this exercise in my trainings. We also do in boot camp. It's called 5 things. In 60 seconds, you can figure out what you should be more self-aware about. So it's 5 things you always want to be as and then you fill in the blank. So you could say 5 things I always want to be as a creative director, or just 5 things I always want to be as a leader, as a manager. And then the next thing is 5 things I never want to be.
Mm.
So you could say, I want to be supportive. I want to be curious. I want to be respectful. Very quickly, you can come up with a list of 5 words. Oh, I never want to be a micromanager. I never want to be the guy who yells at somebody in the hallway. Like, right. And very quickly, you can come up with your list of nevers.
Right.
From there, then I can solicit feedback on those things. I can say, hey, TJ, you know, one thing that's important for me as a leader is that I'm always supportive of other people. And I think lately I've been giving you a lot of no's. Can we just talk about how you've been feeling about presenting me ideas and where your head is at and how I can be more supportive of you and the ideas that you're coming up with? I can take that word and ask people to give me some input on how I'm doing on that word.
I love that. For some reason, this is, at least as I'm hearing this, it sort of depersonalizes it a little bit. It creates a little separation so that you can hear the feedback. Meaning, I always want to be curious as a leader. Okay. You have a conversation around curiosity, and you're not sort of judging all of me. You're just saying, am I bringing that part of myself to the conversations that we're having enough to support you the way you need to be supported? For me, at least, I feel like I'll hear that better than if just somebody's, if you just ask for a broader feedback and it's like, I don't like the way he's, critiquing my work. It's like, okay. 1, I'm defensive, and 2, I'm not even sure what to do with that. But if it's like, he's not getting curious about my work, I'd love you to show up with more curiosity. You don't get the idea. Ask me what's behind it. Bring that. That's how you could bring curiosity. It makes it slightly detached and very actionable, because it's like, okay, I just bring more of that emotion, that word, that
I've never
connection.
thought of it that way. And I'm going to steal that when I talk about it.
Yeah.
So the 5 things are a push and a pull mechanism. So we get feedback pushed to us. We also can pull feedback, right? So we're just trying to teach people it works both ways. And a lot of times managers and leaders aren't used to pulling feedback. And then frankly, people aren't pushing it to them, right? So you have a problem both ways. But if I do this exercise myself, and then I do it with the people on my team, and we all share our words. Now we're a team of keeping people accountable. Like, hey, well, one of your things was always being positive, right? Now we like call each other on them because we know we've given ourselves guardrails on how we want to show up. And so between knowing what I want to stand for, knowing that I actually have to do something to reflect it. I can't say I want to be a curious leader and then never do anything that's curious, like never, like, it's like saying I want to be positive and then I never do anything positive. Like it's a mathematical equation. I have to be positive plus positive plus positive plus positive plus positive equals me being a positive leader and people believing I'm a positive leader. Just because I was positive that last Tuesday, March of 2022,
it has an expiration date.
That doesn't have impact. So we want to be leaders with impact. And we want to be intentional about that. Then decide where your intentions lie with your 5 things, and then do the things that back them up. And then you can solicit feedback on it. So hopefully that helps us at least initiate the start of, I want to be more self-aware about myself.
I like that. And I think, the combination of the words, and then as I heard you just now, it was like, what are the actions I take to live those words? Because curiosity might be like, it's all in here. Like, I am curious inside my head and I ruminate and I wonder, but nobody's getting my curiosity because I'm not asking the questions in my head to people. I'm not saying, tell me more about that idea. It's confusing to me right now, but I'd love to know more about the thinking behind it. And then instead of me going, I don't understand that idea, I'm just going to tell them I don't like it.
And I encourage people just incorporate the word into your leadership language. Right. So start saying the word. I really want to be curious. I'm so curious about what you did this weekend. Hey, what does me being more curious about this idea look like? Like, I'm going to start languaging it. And it's almost like NLP. We're like planting the seeds in our people. Like, this is what I stand for. I'm saying these words. I want to be supportive or respectful. I love how you respected Jane in that meeting that we had yesterday. Like, I'm going to say the words of the things that I want our team to stand for. Is an easy way to just start doing it. Again, it's all practice.
Yeah, I love all that. The one last bit of self-awareness that I think you talk about somewhere on your site that I think is really interesting is how can leaders know when they need to shut their mouth? Because I think we can tend to kind of vomit stuff out that we shouldn't be saying or are saying at the wrong time.
Does anybody ever know when they do that? Here's what I try to teach my kids and managers, right? I say this to them. This conversation is like a tennis game. Okay, I'm going to hit it to you, and then you hit it back, and we have a cadence to that. It is not part of the game for me to pick up the tennis ball and hold it for 20 minutes. It's not just not part of the game.
Right.
The other person will get like bored. They'll start moving around. They'll probably leave the court. And so if I can picture there's a cadence and at some point I need to hit it back, I need to toss the question to you or, hey, what do you think? I need to enroll the other person in the conversation. That's just a good life skill.
Yeah.
But I think in leadership, we just have to be planting the seeds of the team exists by contribution, and just by way of the power position, et cetera, the person in the position of power will contribute the most, will speak the most, will hold the mic the most. We just have to make sure leaders are aware that that's how the stats roll out. And that your job isn't to just hold that mic the whole entire time. Like we're paying people for their contribution. They need the space and the permission and the invitation to contribute into that idea. So, I mean, for me, a whole lot on psych safety. Like this is my year to teach psych safety. Like we've got to be letting leaders know this is how you intimidate people and keep them quiet versus this is how you get them contributing and being, speaking up and adding value to what's part of what the team is.
Yeah. There's also a part of that too, as you were saying that, like the impact of our words as leaders is so strong that the things we might have been okay to say when we were peers with somebody, we have to be more careful about as a leader, right? You have to know when to not say maybe the disparaging thing, the bitch comment about a client or something like that.
Or worry about the finances or something offhanded.
Yeah.
Which somebody can totally take a different way when they report into you. Yeah.
Yeah. Is that part of your program to help people understand that part too?
Well, I have a lesson called arms. I think it's called arm's distance, right? Which is like keeping people at an arm's distance. Like I'm friends with people that I manage. It's just my personality, but also I have to know that I might have to fire them on Monday. Right. So just understanding what that distance is, but also I think I was an oversharer when I first became a manager. I was telling everybody everything because I want to be cool. And that took me some time to figure out that did not serve me or them. And it's just, there's just, again, some fundamental things that I don't think we're teaching managers to just give them like, oh, that's right. I need to think about that. Oh, that's right. I need to be, working on my self-awareness. That's why I love this course so much, but also just in general, why my heart is connected to managers because there's just so much opportunity.
Oh God. Yeah. I mean, so many of the things you say, I was right there with you where it's like, I don't think I knew that until I was 45. And at some of it, I'm like, I don't think I knew that until I became a coach a couple of years ago. And I started to get some of this language in my head, It's just like, why are we not having these conversations? So it's wonderful that you are bringing these conversations and these conversational tools to people because they're just so simple. And then it's just getting the reps in, getting comfortable with the language around it and creating that safety that people need so that we're having the kinds of feedback loops and the kinds of experiences that actually contribute to growth in the right way. And maybe, in this crazy world where everybody's feeling crazy and chaotic, like that can be a counterweight to that. I think if you've got a group of people with these tools, you can all navigate the craziness together where you now feel supported and you feel like you have outlets to talk about it and you feel like you have people you can count on to guide you versus just feeling like you're in a mess of chaos and you can't do anything,
And that's what makes work suck less.
I think it would, right? And I know that's kind of my question that I'm gonna ask if you have any more context to it, like the waving the magic wand and totally desuckifying work. You've really outlined a lot of it already.
Yeah.
But is there anything else that you could add that would just take the suck out of work and make it work better for people?
I think if we got better in saying some of the things that we were thinking, again, being kind and respectful and all that. But I think we spend a lot of time thinking like, oh, I wish my boss wouldn't do that.
Mm-hmm.
Or, like that if we can find a way to say the hard things, that's the start. That's us just getting the things that have to be worked on out on the table. If we never know we have to work on something, then we're not giving it the opportunity to be fixed.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm a well-renowned ruminator. So I have been very guilty of not taking the things out of my head and putting them out into the world over my career. And I'm continually trying to
practice. So when I think of things like that, I try to make sure I do the practice out in my non-work life. So if I'm walking down the street and I see somebody with a cool jacket on and I think, oh, what a cool jacket. I try to remember to say it. I love that jacket. Yeah. So I'm trying to flex the muscle. I thought it. Yeah. I was aware I thought it. And now I'm going to say it. Yeah. That maybe those little moments of practice, then when I'm in a higher risk situation about a thing that might be tougher to say, I've got a little bit of muscle there to lift weight.
Yeah. I love that. I think, that might be a little tool that I might start using a little more because I think that would be helpful. And I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that because I think we do stay in our heads a lot often. One of the things I also ask of people, and you tell me if you were up for it, but I do sound effects on my show. If you've listened at all, there's cat sounds and other goofy sounds. And I always ask a guest, like, any sound you want to contribute that adds to this little library, I'll put it somewhere in the intro probably. Are you game for doing it?
I am, but I'm like, am I saying the sound effect or am I telling you it and you're going to find it?
If you can say it, that would be the ideal state. If you can make it.
So you prefaced me with that question and here's what came to mind. And this is the sound. Dink, dink. And pickleball is like such a craze nowadays. So everyone knows what a little dink is. Okay. That I feel like there's these little moves that we can make, and maybe in managing, maybe just as an employee in life, just little baby moves that have a big impact and can shift how things are going. I think what we spend a lot of time doing is trying to do the big serve, and I'm trying to do the big backhand, and not everything has to be so big and executed. That maybe there are some small things that we can shift, do, adopt that will make a big impact in how we feel at work. Yeah. And it might be just a little ding.
Yeah. I love that. I think when you talked about we're trying to make the big swing, I mean, I think that's so much of what we're like, we either think we need to, or we think we're in a big swing moment where maybe it's actually, we could make it more of a dink moment. And it even took me to your little bit of like, the practicing of saying stuff out loud. It's like just little dinks, throwing those out there. Then you might be ready when you really do need that powerful backhand and you need more of the boom. You'll get the boom, but I think in general, that's just great advice for like making our life feel much more manageable. Yeah. If you sort of bite size it and go, let's just get the dinks in where we can, and then we'll be more prepared for the big stuff. I love that. It will show up in the intro here. So keep an eye and an ear out for that. Awesome. Last thing I always want to ask, obviously, is how can people find you online and learn more about all the awesome stuff you're doing?
All right. Well, anything with Cecilia Gorman in it. So Cecilia with 2 I's, CeciliaGorman.com. On LinkedIn is probably the best place to connect, but my website just outlines everything that I'm doing for managers. You'll find a button for Manager Bootcamp. So anything with my name in it, they'll find me.
Awesome. I will say you have one of the best websites I've seen, because it is both a wonderful like introduction to you, meaning I get a sense of who you are, but it's just littered with tools and resources and stuff. And some of your blog posts, if like some of those reactions to like, this person did this crazy thing. Here's how you might react in that situation. All of that's in there. And then obviously the boot camp and all of that, and some of the one-on-one coaching and all the other stuff you're doing is there too. So highly recommend that people check out your website, obviously follow you on LinkedIn. And I just want to say thank you, Cecilia, for coming on. This was a really fun conversation. And I think we packed a lot of learning into just over an hour. So thank you so much.
I think we did too. So thanks for the invitation to be a voice on your podcast. Appreciate it. So onward and upward on the quest to desuckify work.
Yes, let's do it. All right. Take care, Cecilia. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone for tuning in to the Desuckify Work Podcast. And thanks to Cecilia for bringing energy, optimism, and tangible insights to the conversation. You can follow Cecilia on LinkedIn and check out her site at CeciliaGorman.com, where you'll find a ton of helpful content and learn more about her manager bootcamp. My website and my Substack newsletter are pretty helpful too. Check them out if you'd like to get creative with your creative career or learn more about making the leap from creative maker to creative leader. We can dive deeper into any of that during a free half-hour Desuckified discovery session. Bye, everyone.